with discs rather than normal game cartridges. It never made it outside of Japan, unfortunately, but the system had this short jingle that would play when you booted it up. It's a cute little jingle, but how does that relate to the GameCube? Well, listen to what happens when you speed up the GameCube's home screen music by 19 times. It's the exact melody from the disc system, in the same key too. Here's the disc system theme again for comparison. I think it's so cool that whoever created the GameCube's operating system music decided to reference this pretty obscure tune. Next, we're moving on to talk about a more recent Easter egg. So, back in 2015, the game Super Mario Maker was released, which allowed players to design their own custom Mario stages in the style of various retro Mario games. When creating levels, players could choose which type of stage they wanted to create, i.e. an underwater level, an overground level, or an airship level. But of course, not every old Mario game contained all of those level types. So Nintendo brought back the original composer of Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 3, and Super Mario World, Koji Kondo, to write the hypothetical music the games would have featured back in the 80s. And one of these fake retro pieces of music is the airship theme of Super Mario Bros. Here's what Koji Kondo came up with. It's pretty clever. You really can imagine this music playing had Super Mario Bros. Featured levels on board an airship. Now, 2 years later, Super Mario Odyssey was released, a brand new 3D Mario game with relatively little in common with Super Mario Maker, at least on first glance. But listen to the music from the game's opening cutscene, which takes place on board a huge flying airship. Did you hear? It actually features an orchestral arrangement of Super Mario Bros. Hypothetical airship theme, which is very unexpected. Let's quickly compare the two themes once more. Nintendo's modern Mario games often reference Koji Kondo's retro Mario tunes, but it's less common to see such a modern theme of his incorporated into a game like Odyssey. Back to Breath of the Wild, which is swiftly becoming the main topic of this video. This time we're talking about a song written by Manaka Kataoka for the game. Now, Breath of the Wild has a few different musical themes that play while you explore the land of Hyrule. There's the standard day theme, a theme for exploring at night, and then there's one theme that plays in extremely hot areas like Death Mountain, called Scorching Heat on the game's official soundtrack. Now, take a listen to this one part of the song. So, if you've never played the original Legend of Zelda game from 1986, then you might not have noticed the musical reference here. If you have completed that game though, you'll instantly recognize the melody from the game's final dungeon, Death Mountain. For comparison, here's the Scorching Heat theme from Breath of the Wild once more. As you can see, the melody is directly lifted from Death Mountain's original 1986 theme song, written by the great composer Koji Kondo. So there it is, There are some of the most obscure musical secrets I could find from across all of Nintendo's gaming catalogue, particularly Breath of the Wild. I think it's impressive that Nintendo's composers are able to hide such subtle references inside the music they write, and yet people still find those references. That speaks to the strong melodies that Nintendo have used inside their games' soundtracks ever since the early 1980s. Hey, thanks for watching to the end. I do have a few other interesting secrets that couldn't fit into this video, so let me know if you'd be interested in a sequel. And if you have any good examples that I didn't talk about, please leave them in the comments below. I think this stuff is so cool. Anyway, I'll see you next week. Bye! Link is kind of a funny character to me, because you go on his Wikipedia page and it's like, here is Link, the character. But then if you actually read more closely, it turns out that Link is actually 7 or 8 different guys who all just happen to be called Link. And each time Nintendo makes a new Link, they change his voice too, which is added up to a lot of changes in this one character's voice. I figured that might be too much for one YouTube video, but people kept suggesting I cover this topic anyway. So I spent literally hours reading interviews, watching convention panels, and then typing this script. I am so tired. But I can at least present to you the definitive answer to the question, why has Link's voice changed so much? It all started in 1996 with the game Ocarina... Okay, wait a second. I know I don't normally include the semi-official things, like the cartoons and the anime, but there's one voice that is so iconic it needs to be talked about.
Oh boy! I'm so hungry, I could eat an Octorok!
The critically panned Zelda duology, produced not by Nintendo, but by Philips for their short-lived console, the CDI. These games have become things of legend as time has gone by, in no small part due to their extremely memorable voice performances.
I'm certain he's all right.
Yeah!
The person chosen to voice Link in these games was Jeffrey Rath. At the time, Rath had 0 voice acting experience. He wasn't even sure who Link was. I don't think he'd played a single Zelda game before. But he showed up to the auditions, and he gave a good enough performance that he got the part. Here's what he said about the experience. The voice acting was unprofessional. We were not professionals, and the tech was super experimental. It was still fun to do, and I didn't expect it even to make it to the public. But nevertheless, it did make it to the public, something which I, for one, am grateful for.
What happened?
Nothing, Link. We were just about to have a feast.
Great!
But now let's move on to games that were overseen by and developed within Nintendo. And for that, things start in the year 1996 with the icon that is Ocarina of Time. Now, if you've not played the game, there's actually 2 different Links within Ocarina. There's Young Link and Adult Link, and you switch between the 2 during your adventure. For most of the time that Ocarina of Time was in development, the 2 characters shared a single voice actress. Here's her voice as Young Link, and then here she is voicing Adult Link. Now, as for who this mystery woman was, we'll almost certainly never know. She might have been a developer on this team, that's my personal theory. But anyway, close to the game's release, Link was recast. Nintendo decided to separate the Links and give each one a separate voice, and both the actors picked were working in the anime industry at the time. That is something we will definitely come back to later in the video. Anyway, let's start with Adult Link. For him, Nintendo picked the voice actor Nobuyuki Hiyama. Hiyama was known for often playing young, energetic teenage boys, so his casting as the very energetic Link makes a lot of sense. Interestingly, when Hiyama entered the recording booth, Nintendo told him this: "We're planning on selling this game overseas, so when you are recording your voice lines, please don't make them sound Japanese." He wasn't really sure how best to react to that, or even what it really meant. But he gave the performance his best shot nonetheless. Take a listen. As for young Link, he was played by the voice actress Fujiko Takamoto. Now, Fujiko Takamoto is kind of the opposite of Nobuyuki Hiyama. She was well known for playing young male characters. Zooming out a little, in American and British media, young male characters are usually voiced by men or boys. Not always, but usually. In Japan though, it's the other way round. In almost every case, a young male character will be voiced by a woman. Hence, Fujiko Takamoto and her portrayal of young Link. Now, Ocarina of Time's voice clips were reused in the game's sequel, Majora's Mask. Nobuyuki's adult Link voice clips are also heard in Smash Bros. 64, and again in Smash Bros. Melee, alongside Fujiko Takamoto, who now appears as young Link. In fact, Takamoto's Link voice clips are still found in even the newest Super Smash Bros. Games, something which she herself seems very pleased about, so much so that she bought herself a young Link amiibo. Very cool. However, a few years later, everything changed. After the two N64 Zelda games, Nintendo decided to take a wildly different direction for the next Zelda game, which led to the cartoon-styled Wind Waker. For this game, Link went from a pretty stoic and expressionless guy to pretty much the exact opposite. You can pause just about any frame of the game, and Link will have some kind of goofy expression. And so, rather than reusing Ocarina of Time's voice clips yet again, Nintendo decided to record a whole new set of voice clips for the new game. However, instead of bringing back Fujiko Takamoto, they decided to recast Link with a completely different voice actress. Why did they do this? I'm not sure, to be honest. But this actually marks the beginning of a trend for the rest of the series. For almost every big Zelda game after this point, Nintendo casts a new voice actor as Link, rather than bringing back the current actor. My theory as to why this is that unlike Mario characters, who look more or less the same in every game, Zelda characters vary wildly in appearance from game to game, so keeping the voices consistent isn't really important. So anyway, for this new cartoon Link, or Toon Link as he'd come to be known, Nintendo actually had a good candidate for the voice in mind. Like I said, when Majora's Mask was being developed, Nintendo reused Link's voice clips from the previous game, Ocarina of Time. However, obviously they couldn't do that with the other characters, so they hired a selection of voice actors to cover these character voices. And one actress chosen was Sachi Matsumoto. At the time, she was a fairly new voice actress, appearing in minor roles in a smattering of different anime. But by the time Wind Waker was in development, Matsumoto had appeared in some really well-known shows, like Hamtaro and Gundam Seed. And so, Nintendo decided to call her back after Majora's Mask, but this time, she would play the main character, Link. To match Wind Waker's more expressive Link, she adopted a pretty expressive range of sounds.
Yeah, hooked up!
Oh no, no.
Oh, and interestingly, she was asked to provide one English voice line for the game, the phrase, "Come on."
Come on!
So, Sachi Matsumoto's voice clips appeared in quite a few games released around this time, like Four Swords Adventure and Phantom Hourglass. Plus, much like Fujiko Takamoto, her voice clips continue to appear in the Super Smash series to this day as the character Toon Link. Plus, they're also in the first Hyrule Warriors game. So, for a while during the mid-2000s, it seemed like this was the one voice that Link was gonna have forever. But then, in 2006, everything changed. So, somewhat in response to the mixed feedback towards Wind Waker's cartoon style, the Zelda team decided to pull a 180 with their next game and go full dark, brooding realism. Okay, well, it's not like Call of Duty, but compared to what came before, this new game, called Twilight Princess, was about as dark and serious as Zelda got. The new design for Link was tall and manly. And so Sachi Matsumoto's voice clips just wouldn't fit. I mean, just picture these sounds coming from this guy.
Come on!
So Nintendo decided to hire a new Link. And the voice actor chosen was a guy named Akira Sasanuma. Like Link's last voice actor, he had also appeared in Gundam Seed. In fact, it was probably his biggest role at the time. However, as for Link, well, Sasanuma really struggled with this role. He was asked in an interview which character of all he'd found the hardest to play, and his answer was Link. He said, "The hardship was that there are no real lines with Link. You have to do all the acting by breathing and making odd sounds to make people understand what Link wants to express. Until that came through, they asked me to keep on trying again and again, so it was a really hard job." He and a fellow voice actress were asked which character they had most enjoyed playing. Sasanuma said essentially that he liked all of his characters. But then this happened.
Don't pretend!
やっぱりその中でもゼルダのリンクだけはセリフじゃないんですよね。ちゃんと言葉を喋るキャラクターの方がやってて楽しい。
Still, Sasanuma gave the role his all, and after hours and hours in the recording booth, the voice clips were finally completed. Take a listen. Now, after Twilight Princess was released, Akira Sasanuma appeared in just a couple more games. The much loved and much revered, I'm kidding, Link's crossbow training for the Wii, and then also in Smash Bros. Brawl, and again in Smash for Wii U and 3DS. But as for any other big Zelda games, no, Akira Sasanuma never appeared as Link again. So who did? Who was Link's next voice? Well, for this we need to move back to the DS, because we've got another game featuring Toon Link. This time, the game is Spirit Tracks. And curiously enough, Nintendo decided not to use the classic Toon Link voice provided by Sachi Matsumoto. Instead, they hired a new voice actress called Yuki Kodaira. Kodaira had never worked with the Zelda series before, and in fact, she was almost a complete rookie at the time. Why Nintendo picked her to temporarily take over the role of Toon Link for one game is a bit of a mystery, but she did a good job nonetheless. Check it out. Now, like I said, this was just a temporary one-off thing. Kodaira never returned to the series. However, if you've played Mario Odyssey, then you have heard her voice, even if you didn't know it. And that's because almost a decade later, Nintendo hired Yuki Kodaira once more to play various roles in Super Mario Odyssey. Harriet, Madame Brood, Tiara, and Cookatiel. All of those voices were provided by her. Right, so now we return to the home console games. After releasing the dark and serious Twilight Princess, the Zelda team decided to lighten things up a bit with a more whimsical and light-hearted game, which ended up taking the form of Skyward Sword. All of a sudden, Akira Sasanuma's voice clips from Twilight Princess didn't seem to fit the mood at all. So Nintendo decided to find someone who could deliver a lighter and more anime-inspired performance. Now, while this was all going on, another team at Nintendo were porting the retro space shooter Star Fox 64 onto the 3DS. Since the voice clips from the original game were old and compressed, the team decided to hire a completely new cast and record the voices from scratch. For the main role of Fox McCloud, they picked voice actor Takashi Ohara. Fun fact, you can hear Ohara as Fox in Smash Ultimate, so listen out for that next time you're playing. Anyway, the team working on Skyward Sword must have heard his performance in Star Fox for the 3DS and taken a liking to the guy, because they decided that, as well as Fox, he would be perfect for their new iteration of Link. Unlike Nobuyuki Hiyama, all the way back with Ocarina of Time, it seems that Takashi Ohara was not told not to sound Japanese, because this performance sounds extremely anime-inspired, as many listeners have noted. Some people aren't keen on Takashi Ohara's Link, but I really like it personally. I think it's fun. Sadly though, this iteration of the voice never got a chance to appear in any of the Smash Bros games, but it can be heard in Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Before we move on, I figured I should quickly address the elephant in the room. If Nintendo are hiring all of this acclaimed voice acting talent, then why aren't they having Link speak at all? Well, here's what Zelda composer Koji Kondo has to say. The most important thing about the Zelda series is that the player becomes Link. One of the challenges with full voice is that we're trying to convey the player's emotion through Link, but if you hear Link talking in somebody else's voice, that creates a disconnect between you and the role you're taking on. Now, that is true to an extent, I'm sure, but according to producer Eiji Aonuma, there are other, more practical reasons too. Everyone would be speaking Hylian, so even if you heard them speak, you wouldn't understand them. Just you wait a few years, Eiji Aonuma. You'll change your mind on that one. Okay, so moving on, we're getting really close to Link's current voice. But first, we need to take a quick pit stop back in the land of the handheld. Early in the 3DS's life, Nintendo decided to make a half remake, half sequel to A Link to the Past. They obviously couldn't keep using the old beeps and boops from the original game though. They would feel very out of place on the 3DS. So, rather than 16-bit sound effects, Link was given some new voice clips. Rather than one of the previous actors, Nintendo opted to hire a woman called Mitsuki Saiga. Now, Saiga is a really prolific voice actress, well known for her extremely low voice, which allows her to play both female and male characters. Perfect for Link, who is male. Here's what her voice sounds like in the game. She also, by the way, voices Ravio. Hey! Next up is a really interesting one. For the game Hyrule Warriors, which was developed not by Nintendo, but instead by Koei Tecmo, Link was given a completely unique voice. I'm not sure if the reason is because the game wasn't developed by Nintendo, but for whatever reason, Koei Tecmo hired a really famous voice actor to record some new voice clips for Link. The actor's name is Yuki Kaji. Check out just how many projects he's been in, scrolling through his Wikipedia. Or here's a great piece of anecdotal evidence. The website Behind the Voice Actors has a list of which actors were searched for the most in any given week. And the week I'm writing this script, he's number 3 out of everyone on the website. Now, this was a complete one-off. Yuki Kaji didn't return for the game's sequel. He's never been in any other Zelda games either. But for just this single game in 2014, Link was voiced by voice acting royalty. Take a listen. Alright, so before we get to the big final one, Breath of the Wild, we've actually got an interesting curiosity to cover. Triforce Heroes. It was a 3-player Zelda game for the 3DS. Each of the 3 players are Link, only they wear different coloured outfits. That works well visually to tell them apart, but what about auditorily? How would the players tell the 3 voices apart? Well, the developers came up with a really clever answer. When you begin a new game, your Link character is randomly assigned one of 4 different previous Link voices. You can get Fujiko Takamoto's Young Link from Ocarina of Time, Sachi Matsumoto's Toon Link, Yuki Kodaira's Link from Spirit Tracks, or Mitsuki Saiga's Link from A Link Between Worlds. It's a very clever system. Okay, finally back to console games. So after the release of Skyward Sword in 2011, developers at Nintendo began experimenting with what exactly the next Zelda game should be, where the series as a whole should go. It took years and years of iteration, but eventually they ended up with the critically acclaimed and best-selling Breath of the Wild. In just about every way, this game drew a clear line between itself and the games that came before it. And so, it's no surprise that Nintendo decided to recast Link for the game. And the person they chose was, to be frank, a no-name. Well, he has a name, Kengo Takanashi. And since Breath of the Wild, he's been in some quite well-known shows. But back in 2016, he had played only background characters in a handful of anime. He was not a well-established voice actor. But Nintendo took a chance on him. Evidently, they were impressed by his audition for the role, because shortly afterwards, he was brought into the recording studio, where he recorded all 244 noises that Link makes. And they some good noises. Take a listen. Which brings us to the current day. Kengo Takanashi is the current voice for Link, appearing in not only Breath of the Wild, but also the spin-off game, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, along with Smash Bros. Ultimate. Plus, I would assume that his voice will be the one heard in Breath of the Wild 2, when that game eventually comes out. Although, knowing Nintendo, there's always a chance they recast. You just never know. Hey, thanks for sticking with me for all 20 minutes of this video. Wow, I didn't plan it to be that long. I've got more videos like this coming next week, so you can subscribe to see them as soon as they come out. Thanks for sticking with me. Bye. Toad has an extremely distinctive voice. It's so harsh sounding and screechy. But go back 20 years and he sounds like this instead. Yeah! He doesn't sound the same at all.
I'm the best!
In fact, he's completely missing all of that screechiness that makes Toad's voice so iconic nowadays. So why on earth did Toad's voice change so dramatically? Well, it was kind of an accident. It definitely wasn't planned to sound this way. Come on a journey with me to answer the question, why has Toad's voice changed so much? Before we start, let's just get this out of the way. I'm leaving out the old Mario cartoons and anime, as always, because they weren't controlled by Nintendo themselves. We're talking strictly Nintendo-sanctioned voices here. So Toad actually got his very first voice earlier than you might expect. It came in the year 1994, in the SNES version of the game Wario's Woods. This is a puzzle game, somewhat similar to Tetris, developed by Nintendo and Intelligent Systems. And take a listen to this.
Cool!
That was Toad speaking just there. Let me play another clip.
Yes!
Actually, to be specific, that was Red Toad. You see, Wario's Woods has two different Toads. One is red and one is green. And oddly enough, Green Toad has his own unique set of voice clips.
Hello!
Let's compare the two. Here's what Red Toad sounds like.
Breakfast! Yes! Woohoo! Winner! Sweet! Cool!
And then here's Green Toad.
Hello! Whoa! Yowza! Groovy! Breakfast! Score!
Green Toad sounds more gruff and manly. So, who are the voice actors behind these voices? Well, there's nothing whatsoever in the game's credits about voice acting at all. However, in amongst the sea of Japanese names, there are two suspicious-looking English names, Michael Kelbau and Robin Krause. Both Michael and Robin were working with or around Nintendo at the time this game was in development, and as native English speakers, I think they may well be the people behind the two Toad voices. It's hard to know for sure, but that's my guess. Now, this game isn't really connected at all to the rest of the evolution of Toad's voice. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo themselves forgot that Toad spoke in this game. But as an official Nintendo-developed game, I couldn't leave it off the list. But now, let's move on to where things properly get started. Okay, so it all begins for real in 1996. Not Mario 64, Toad is in that game, but he never actually speaks. No, Toad's first memorable voice role came a little later in the year, with Mario Kart 64. For the first time ever, Nintendo wanted their Mario Kart racers to speak. However, most of the voice actors chosen were just Japanese Nintendo employees with some free time. As for Toad, well, his voice was provided by a woman named Tomoko Maruno. Now, literally nothing is known about who this woman was and how she came to voice Toad. Heck, there's not even a single photograph of her out there. But what there is her performance as Toad. Take a listen.
Woo! Here we go! Yeah! I am the best!
Now, when it came time to localize Mario Kart 64 into English, Nintendo of America decided to re-record some of the voices using native English speakers. I can only assume that's because some of those original voices have fairly thick Japanese accents. Anyway, one of the voices that was redone in English was Toad's, and the guy that was chosen to voice this character was Isaac Marshall. He was actually a game tester for Nintendo. For instance, he played through all 3 Donkey Kong Country games to try and spot bugs and glitches before the general public could. But when Nintendo needed a new voice for Toad, Isaac Marshall was the one chosen for the role. He decided to go for a fairly youthful and very energetic sound.
Woo! Here we go! Ah, whoa, 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 whoa. Ah! Yeah! I'm the best!
Now, interestingly, after this, Nintendo actually reversed course a little. In the first 3 Mario Party games, along with Mario Kart for the Game Boy Advance, they went back to using Tomoko Maruno's voice for Toad,
I am the best!
rather than the more recent Isaac Marshall clips.
I'm the best!
To be clear, I'm not just talking about the Japanese versions of these games. All around the world, people listen to the Japanese voice clips. But then, in 1999, when Nintendo were working on Mario Golf for the N64, they decided to hire a professional voice actress to take on the role. You see, they were already holding auditions to find a new voice for Princess Peach, so they figured they could look for someone to play Toad as well. With both these characters, what they wanted is for someone to perfectly mimic the current voices of the characters, and that's when they met Jen Taylor. Jen Taylor is a voice actress who is great at mimicking voices. She's done it her whole life. And so she was able to perfectly mimic both the current voice of Princess Peach and the voice of Toad. I'm honestly not sure if Nintendo were looking for one person to play both characters, but Jen Taylor could do it. And so in Mario Golf, here's what Toad sounds like.
Try again! Yeah! Oh, B! Okay!
Wait, what? Hang on, that doesn't sound like Toad did before.
Woo!
Suddenly, he's got that gruff sound in his voice.
Try again!
What happened? Well, this is one part of the story that I really don't understand. I have scoured hours and hours of interviews with Jen Taylor, and in every interview, she says something to this effect.
And so I just literally went in there and imitated the woman who had done it before me. And that's how I got that gig.
Okay, well, that's something to work from. She wasn't imitating Isaac Marshall's voice.
Yeah!
She was definitely trying to sound like Tomoko Maruno.
Yeah!
Except she doesn't. She doesn't sound at all the same.
Try again!
Well, okay, that's not exactly fair. When you listen to the two voices side by side and you listen for similarities, there are some things in common.
Okay!
Okay!
They both have a sort of similar high pitch and high energy type thing. But it seems as though Jen Taylor added that gruffness herself. In most of the clips, it's pretty subtle, so it's not like it changed the performance a huge amount. Except, by only a few games later, this gruff Marge Simpson sound had ballooned out of control. Here's Toad from Super Mario Advance, for instance, which was only the third game released featuring Jen Taylor's voice.
Oh, Reggie! Hi-ya! Here I go! Ah! I got it! Yeah! Just what I needed! Yes!
I mean, the only thing you can notice about that performance is the gruff, gravelly sound. Everything else kind of disappears into the background. So that's what I mean when I say the voice was created by accident. I don't mean that Jen Taylor was ill and that's where the sound came from. No, what I mean is that Jen Taylor was just trying to mimic the previous voice, but she didn't do a very good job of it. She introduced a slight rasp to the voice, but over time this rasp became more and more exaggerated. And then something big happened. Jen Taylor left Nintendo. So I've talked about this before, but around 2005 or 2006, Jen Taylor decided to stop working with Nintendo so she had more time to work with the Seattle Children's Theatre, which left Nintendo without a voice for Peach and Toad. However, unlike Peach, Nintendo were able to mostly get by reusing old recordings of Toad's voice. It's not like he generally comments on anything specific that's happening in the games, so no one's going to notice if you use an old clip in a new game. Except there was one game where they did need new recordings, Super Mario Strikers, the slightly bizarre Mario football game. Apparently none of the old recordings from Nintendo's archive really fit the vibe of the game very well, because they decided they needed some new voice clips. Now, while this was going on, Nintendo was searching for someone to take over from Jen Taylor full-time. But before they found that person, they decided to hire a temporary replacement in the form of a woman named Kelsey Hutchinson. Again, there's no photo of her on the internet. For some reason, this story seems to attract mysterious individuals. But perhaps it's for the better, as her take on Toad is pretty notoriously unpopular. I'm gonna play you a sample, but first let me give you a warning. You might want to get ready to turn that volume down if this is a bit much.
Next level games! Nintendo!
So that was probably the screechiest that Toad has ever sounded, but it also somehow fails to get that specific Toad sound right. Still, it's not like I could do a better job. Toad's voice is pretty hard to recreate. Anyway, these sounds were also reused in the game's sequel for the Wii, bringing this noise to a whole new generation. Lucky them. Meanwhile, Nintendo was still searching for that perfect person to take over both of Jen Taylor's characters. And that's when they came across someone who was bizarrely perfect for the job, Samantha Kelly. Samantha Kelly was voicing TV commercials at the time, but when she heard about the audition for Peach and Toad, she couldn't believe her ears. Her natural speaking voice sounded really similar to Jen Taylor's, so if she just pitched it up a bit, it was a perfect match for Peach. But Toad? That was far stranger. You're not going to believe this, but from about the age of 12, Samantha Kelly had been doing Toad's exact voice, without even knowing it, without even knowing who Toad was.
That was a voice that I had played with when I was a little kid, you know, when my mom was tucking me into bed. I had this little puppet character named Cedric. You know, my mom would be like, "Stop it, you're driving me crazy." And then it was like, this is kind of a fit.
Of course, that didn't mean her first recording session wasn't nerve-wracking. Apparently, the recording booth kept getting hotter and hotter and she got nervous and sweaty. Yeah, I can't blame her. It seems like a stressful job. But this recording session ended up being a success, and her Toad debut came in the game Mario Party 8 in 2007. Here's her first ever Toad voice.
Yahoo! Yay! Go! Me! Oh, no! I'm the best! Yeah! Rats!
It's funny, at the time, that was probably the most Toady that Toad's voice had ever sounded. But his voice somehow kept getting more and more exaggerated as time went by. In fact, by now, it's such an extreme voice to perform that when Samantha Kelly comes to record new voice lines, they always have to do Peach's voice first. That's because after doing Toad, her voice is so destroyed that she can't do the Peach voice anymore. Her voice literally won't go high enough. So they first go through all of the high-pitched characters, like Peach and Baby Peach. Then, after that, they move on to Toad. Even with Toad, though, they start with the lower energy noises. Then they move up through the ranking gradually, until finally they reach the very last lines, which are the truly voice-shattering ones. Keep in mind, these voice recording sessions typically last for 4 hours at least. And so, finally, after all of that, Samantha Kelly goes home, and only by the next day has her voice started to heal. I mean, that's pretty extreme. She mentioned as well that she's constantly having to drink loads and loads of water during the records just to try and keep her voice alive. Wow. And you can hear just how extreme Toad's voice has become in a more modern game like Mario Kart 8.
Woo! Yeah! Here I go!
So that's how Toad's voice came to be. It started out normal, but as the voice actors changed behind the scenes, each one exaggerated the gravelly tone just a little more, until the present day when Toad's voice is, well, it's certainly distinctive. And hey, while I was working on this video, I tried to do the Toad voice myself, and it hurt really bad. So I have a lot of respect for both Jen Taylor and Sam Kelly, who performed and continue to perform this voice for years on end. Rather them than me. Both Bowser and Peach have also gone through pretty dramatic voice changes, so if you're interested in that, you can check out either video. They're on screen right now. Plus, if you want to... Oh, there's a fly on my keyboard. Sorry. If you want to hear more stories going behind the scenes of your favorite games, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you see the videos as soon as I've finished making them. See you next time. Sonic has always had something of an attitude, but if you listen closely, the voice coming out...
So what, he's gonna burn me with flamethrowers or something?
It's really quite different. So I started looking into why that is. Why Sonic keeps cycling through multiple voice actors and huge changes in style. And the main culprit? It's Sega, the game's developer. So let's travel back to the 90s in order to answer the question, why doesn't Sonic's voice sound like it used to? Oh, but before we start, I'm going to be talking about the English language voices here, not the Japanese ones, just to keep this video from getting too long. Okay. So, the story of Sonic's English voice begins in the year 1993, when 2 different Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons began airing on TV in the same month, September 1993. One of them was called Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and the other was just called Sonic the Hedgehog. And these series are where Sonic first got his voice. At the time, actor Jaleel White was at the height of his fame. He was a child actor who'd been working in TV since he was 4. But his big break came a few years later when he played the character Steve Urkel on Family Matters. Now, you almost certainly recognize Steve Urkel, but in the 90s, he was everywhere. And TV network ABC was keen to keep this character at the front and center of people's minds. So back to Sonic. In mid-1993, animation studio DIC Entertainment decided to pitch ABC a cartoon series based on Sonic, and asked DIC Entertainment to start again from scratch. The new cartoon was much darker in tone. So how did we end up with 2 Sonic cartoons then? Well, DIC didn't want to waste all that work they put into the first series, so they decided to have it syndicated instead. Which just means that rather than having it air on a big network like ABC, it aired on smaller, regional networks. And that is how we ended up with 2 Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons airing at the same time, both featuring the voice of Jaleel White. Here's how his Sonic sounded.
About time, Sal. You ready? Okay, guys, let's do it. Cool. I'm out of here.
By the way, since Jaleel White was a child at the time, he usually recorded his voice separately from the rest of the cast, since these recording sessions were during school time and he was a student. But this also meant he could retry a line again and again until he was happy with how it sounded. And it turns out, a lot of how it sounded was left up to him.
I deliberately wanted to make him, you know, because I'm black, if you haven't noticed. I really wanted to make him just like of no race. So when you listen to Sonic, I don't think you even get an impression that, is he black, is he white, is he a surfer, is he whatever. No, instead he's just hero, just fast.
Sorry, poor brains, got a juice.
So, after those two cartoons began airing, we enter what I call the wishy-washy zone, where Sonic's English voice was just whoever was available at the time. Like in 1993, for the educational game Sonic's Schoolhouse, actress Meg Inglemer was cast as Sonic, the only woman who's ever played the character.
Hi there, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog. You're going to play in my schoolhouse.
Then, in 1993, Jaleel White came back as Sonic in the cartoon Sonic Underground. Then, only 1 week after that, Sonic the Hedgehog the movie was released in America, again with a completely different voice for Sonic. This time, he was voiced by Martin Burke.
I'm fine, just fine. So, who's that? Count me out.
Sonic, we've got to do something to help him.
You're the one who can fly. You do something.
So that's the wishy-washy zone. But then, 2 days after the Sonic movie, a new game came out which forever changed the sound of Sonic's voice. Its name, Sonic Adventure. So, in 1998, the Sonic series was becoming a little stale in the public consciousness, so Sega felt as though they had to shake things up and develop a next-generation Sonic game with 3D graphics, huge expansive levels, and full voice acting. For the Japanese version of the game, Sega hand-picked the voice actor for Sonic themselves. But for the English language version, they instead began holding auditions across America. And one actor who showed up to one of these auditions was Ryan Drummond. Now, Ryan Drummond originally came from a theatrical background, but in the 90s, he was just beginning to get into voice acting. And so, he showed up to Sega's audition without really knowing what the audition was for. As Drummond himself explained, when I got there, I was given pictures of all the characters, and I had a few moments to come up with what I thought would be the right voice for each one. I tried out for every voice I could, but the only one I felt I had really nailed was Sonic's voice. I guess I was right, because they offered me the job about 15 minutes later. That's really rare, by the way. Usually after auditions, actors have to wait days, weeks, sometimes months to hear anything back. But clearly, Sega really liked Ryan Drummond's audition, because he was given the part there and then. And so, in 1999, players in the US and Europe heard the following voice for Sonic.
Oh no! I've had enough! All right, put him up! Oh no! Come on, Tails! Hey, hey, hey! All right, Tails! Hey, Tails! You made it!
Now, Drummond continued providing Sonic's voice for all of the Sonic games that followed Adventure, like Sonic Shuffle, Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, and Sonic Advance 3. By this point, Ryan Drummond's voice was cemented in players' minds as the voice of Sonic. Which brings us to something called Sonic X. Sonic X was a TV anime series produced by Japanese animation studio TMS Entertainment, who are best known for animating Lupin the Third and Detective Conan. Now, Sonic X was different from most of the previous animated Sonic adaptations in that it was created primarily for a Japanese audience, with the Japanese cast from the Sonic games all reprising their roles. However, it wasn't long before Sega began work on adapting the series for an English audience. And to do this, they enlisted the help of the infamous 4Kids Entertainment. When Ryan Drummond was asked about the series around this time, he said, "Sega America and I really get along, and I knew they'd like to keep using me. Also, there are a lot of fans out there who have approved of my voice for Sonic. And when the people that buy the games speak, the company listens. I'm hoping that 4Kids Entertainment will agree with that theory and use me for Sonic X." They did not do that. This is actually one of the most controversial chapters of Sonic's history, the Great Recast of 2004. 4Kids decided to recast just about every character, rather than hiring the voice cast from the games. Now, Ryan Drummond actually explained the story firsthand on his blog at the time, so I want to read out exactly what he wrote to keep things crystal clear. The full story is this. I told my contacts at Sega that I wanted to at least have the opportunity to audition for what I believed to be my part. I was hoping that I would just be offered the part, but that didn't happen. Sega told me that the production company who owns the rights to the anime, 4Kids Productions, had all the power in the Sonic X series, and that Sega team had nothing to do with it. Sega was nice enough to recommend me to 4Kids, and told them I should at least be considered for the role that I've been portraying for 4 years now. At that point, I waited for 4Kids to call me. Never happened. After a while, and over 500 emails from fans asking whether or not I was going to voice Sonic for this cartoon, I decided to call 4Kids myself and find out what was going on. So I put in a few calls and emails, and after a week, heard back from the assistant of someone I tried to contact. She told me that her boss was too swamped to talk to me, and suggested I call the production office. I did, and left a message for someone called Julie, who I was told was in charge of casting for Sonic X. I received an email back from Julie's colleague. Here's what it said. Dear Mr. Drummond, I understand that you left a voice message for my associate, Julie, today. Ryan, I can imagine how you must feel about having another actor voice Sonic. I can only assure you that it was never the aim of 4Kids to change the original voices or replace any of the game voice actors. The simple reality is that we need to hire actors who live in the New York area. I am truly sorry that circumstances prevent the original game voices from being in the series, and I sympathize with all the game actors. It's unfortunate that we weren't all based in the same place. In any case, I wish you continued success. Sincerely, Michael, producer of Sonic X. So, that's why Ryan Drummond wasn't hired as Sonic's voice. He did say that he would happily move to New York if 4Kids wanted, but it was too little, too late. 4Kids was already holding auditions to pick out a new cast for the Sonic crew. And one person who showed up to these auditions was Jason Griffith. Jason Griffith was an aspiring voice actor. He'd starred in one live-action film in the 90s, but in 2003, he was just starting to audition for some voice acting roles, which is how he got acquainted with 4Kids. He was actually turned down from a role in the anime Shaman King, but a couple of weeks later, he was called back in to audition for the Sonic anime instead. He first tried for the role of human being Chris Thorndike, but he was asked to try using that exact same voice for Sonic instead. According to Griffith himself,
I didn't really think it went that well, but I got a call back, which I thought went even worse. And then I think a week and a half later, they called to say I got the part.
So, before the recording of the first episode, 4Kids played Jason Griffith a clip of what the previous voice of Sonic sounded like.
Oh yeah! This is happening!
They played it for me and said, here's what he sounds like now. We don't want you to copy that, but just to know it can't go too far out of that ballpark, because it would be a different character then, you know.
And so, that brings us to episode 1 of the Sonic X anime. Here's how Jason Griffith sounds in the show.
Take a good look. I'm a hedgehog, not a cat. Good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a very good answer, because I don't remember. Oh, no wonder. Tastes like there's cat in it. Sorry, kid, but crickets don't do it for me. Huh, see ya.
So, at the time, this change of voice actors seemed like a temporary thing, just for the Sonic X anime. But then came a surprise announcement. Sega had entered a contract with 4Kids to use their Sonic X cast in the games as well. Reportedly, this was done to retain consistency between all types of Sonic media, but it came as a pretty sudden and unpleasant announcement for the current Sonic game voice actors, who had promptly learned that they were out of a job. The first games featuring Jason Griffith as the voice of Sonic were Sonic Rush for the DS and Shadow the Hedgehog. Both games came out on the same day. Here's a quick clip of Sonic's voice from Shadow the Hedgehog.
Ah! Yahoo! Hey, he's on our side. Stop! Shadow, what are you doing? Nice job, Shadow. Hey, not bad.
Interestingly, Griffith also took on the voice of Shadow the Hedgehog. He was completely left up to his own devices with that voice, basing it on an old roommate he used to know who said everything in a very dramatic way.
Damn it, I can't die here. This can't be. Damn, not here. I am the ultimate. Chaos? It's like there's cat in it.
Into a more serious, grown-up and fleshed-out Sonic.
Chip, you were... wow.
But just as Griffith's voice was beginning to really come into its own, everything stopped. Sega's contract with 4Kids was over, and so came another big recast. Let me introduce you to Roger Craig Smith. Back in 2010, he was already a pretty renowned voice actor, having appeared in both Resident Evil and Assassin's Creed, among many others. And during 2010, Craig Smith received a call from his agent. Apparently, Sega was holding auditions for a video game character, and they wanted him to be there. So, Craig Smith showed up at the studio, and Sega revealed they were recasting Sonic the Hedgehog. As Craig Smith explained, they say, "This is what we're trying to do. This is kinda what direction we want to skew him in. This is where we want to go," that kind of thing. And it's up to you to tell us what you want to do. A few weeks went by, and Sega called him back into the studio once more. They had narrowed down the candidates, but they needed to hear Craig Smith give one more performance as Sonic. And to his delight, he was picked for the role. He was the new voice of Sonic the Hedgehog. Interestingly, the debut of Roger Craig Smith's Sonic voice didn't come in any of the games, but instead at British theme park Alton Towers, where he gave safety instructions as Sonic.
First up, you need to be at least 1.2 meters tall to ride.
But it wasn't long until Craig Smith appeared in a big main series Sonic game, Sonic Colors for the Wii. Here's how he sounds in that.
Aw, couldn't keep up? That was pretty fun. That beats riding a slowpoke Ferris wheel any day. A little rough, but that was my kind of ride.
If you noticed that Sonic sounded a little deeper than usual, well, according to Roger Craig Smith, Sega themselves actually requested that he make the character sound older than it did before. Anyway, for the next 10 years, Craig Smith continued to appear as Sonic, not just in the big mainline games, but also in loads of other Sonic media, like the Sonic Boom cartoon. In fact, in my own personal opinion, I think Roger Craig Smith's performance shines the brightest in this cartoon. He's said himself that he feels most at home doing comedy, and I think that really shows.
Prepare to be destroyed by Burn Pot.
So what, he's gonna burn me with flamethrowers or something?
Pressure going up. No.
However, in early 2021, a pretty sad announcement was made. Roger Craig Smith tweeted the following message. Well, 10 years was an amazing run. Onward to new zones. Much love to the fans who've been so kind. It's been an honor. People couldn't believe it. Was Roger Craig Smith leaving the role of Sonic? Well, shortly afterwards, Sega shared the following message. For over 10 years, Roger Craig Smith has been an integral part of the Sega family. He brought the voice of Sonic to life, and we are forever grateful for his never-ending enthusiasm in helping the community and spreading joy. Thank you, Roger, for all you've done for Sonic. So, there it was. After a decade of providing Sonic's voice, Roger Craig Smith, much like Jaleel White, Ryan Drummond, and Jason Griffith, was leaving the role of Sonic. I and many people around the world were just left wondering who would take over the role next. Until, it is, 4 months later, when Roger Craig Smith put out a new tweet. I can't fully express my gratitude for the Sonic the Hedgehog crew and community. I hope to honor your support and passion as I'm officially back voicing Sonic the Hedgehog in games. So it turns out people were worried for nothing. As for what exactly was going on behind the scenes, it's really hard to know. But considering Amy and Tails' voice actresses announced they were departing from their roles too, it seems as though there was some kind of big shakeup going on at Sega. Regardless, Roger Craig Smith is still the voice of Sonic after all, which I personally am very happy about. Here's to another 10 years! I know Sonic's voice can often be polarizing. Everyone has their own opinion about which voice is the true voice of Sonic. From the classic, cartoony Jaleel White, to the adventure-era Ryan Drummond, to the unleashed voice of Jason Griffith, to the modern Sonic's Roger Craig Smith, I think we can all agree that Sonic has been in some pretty safe hands over the years. I can't wait to see where Sonic's gonna spin dash off to next. This video was a bit of a marathon to put together, so thank you to everyone who watched it to the end. I think you'd enjoy my video about why Luigi doesn't sound like he used to if you've not seen it yet. Plus, I have plenty of other videos on my channel for you to check out. See ya!
It's April 21st, 2019. Competitors and spectators have gathered in Laurel, Maryland for the Pound 2019 tournament. Today we visit the meeting of two players, competing under the aliases of Mango and Hungrybox. They are playing Super Smash Bros. Melee, a video game released in 2001 for the Nintendo GameCube. Despite the age of the game, this event has managed to attract a live audience of a few hundred spectators and upwards of 70,000 viewers tuning in from around the world. Today is Championship Sunday. After battling past the rest of the competition, the top 12 players are competing for the title of this year's Pound Champion. Tournament in 5th place. Hungrybox wins and advances to face Zane in the losers semifinals. Quickly, Hungrybox finds himself in deep trouble, about to fall to an 0-2 deficit. With his back against the wall, once again, Hungrybox wins, eliminating Plup at 3rd. After defeating everyone in the losers bracket, Hungrybox has only one competitor left to face, Mango, the player who sent him down there in the first place.